The ocean was calm again. Too calm. The kind of stillness that doesn't belong to nature, but to aftermath. The silence left behind after something enormous has moved out of sight, but not out of presence. The crew stood scattered across the control room, breaths shallow, pulses racing, listening to the ship settle back into equilibrium. Metal groaned softly, as if the vessel itself were exhausted from resisting whatever had wrapped around it moments earlier. But the strangest part was the air. It felt heavier, colder, charged with a pressure that didn't match the outside atmosphere, as if something that wasn't supposed to be up here had come up anyway. The historian stood closest to the drone. Cerberus X-1 lay motionless on the table now, its glow extinguished, its unnerving behavior halted. But even without power, the machine looked different, like an object touched by something it should never have encountered. Its metallic frame held a faint, dark sheen, as if coated by a residue not from the sea, but from the void behind that impossible door. The captain walked in, face tense, jaw locked. "Damage report." The engineer wiped his forehead. "Hull's intact, mostly. Lower compartments took stress impacts, but no catastrophic breach, somehow." His voice trembled on the last word. "By all logic, we should have lost the ship." The captain stared at him. "But we didn't." The historian spoke quietly behind them. "It wasn't trying to destroy us." Everyone turned. He continued, "If it wanted the ship gone, it could have crushed us like a tin can. But it didn't. It only applied pressure where it had to. It wasn't attacking us." His eyes dropped to the drone. "It was negotiating." A chill rippled through the room. The sonar officer, still pale, muttered, "Then what was the message?" The historian didn't answer. He didn't need to. Every screen, every sound, every whisper repeated those same words. "Return below." The communication system crackled, not with voices now, but with deep static waves, soft, almost rhythmic, as if the ocean itself was speaking through the wires. The captain moved toward the console, but the historian held out a hand. "Listen." The static pulses came again, soft, measured, slow. One of the researchers swallowed. "It's the same pattern the void emitted below." The historian nodded. "And it followed the drone because it sensed something. Not the machine, but the movement, the entrance, the disturbance." He stepped closer to the screen, showing the last captured image. The figure standing inches from the threshold of the void, waiting for something that never came. "We woke it," he whispered. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. The operator looked at the drone. "Why did it stop following us? Why did it retreat?" The historian finally turned to them. "Because we didn't open the door." Silence. Thick. Unblinking. Suffocating. The captain exhaled slowly. "What door?" The historian pointed to the still frame. "That door." The engineer stepped back. "But that wasn't a real door. It didn't belong to any deck plan. It wasn't attached to anything inside the ship." "Exactly," the historian said. "It didn't belong to the Titanic. It belonged to the void behind it." The sonar specialist muttered, "Like a portal." The historian didn't blink. "Like an entrance." Everyone fell silent again. Then the communication system crackled once more, this time with a strange metallic rhythm. Not a voice, not breathing. Something else. A knock. 3 knocks. Slow. Deliberate. The same pattern recorded behind the door. The same pattern the drone had heard deep inside the wreck. Every person in the room froze in place. The sound echoed again. Knock, knock, knock. But this time, it was louder. Closer. Above them. The captain's eyes snapped upward. "Top deck." The crew rushed out of the control room and onto the outer deck. Fog drifted low across the surface of the ocean. A pale, shimmering layer that had not been there an hour ago. The moonlight reflected off the mist, giving the water a faint silver shine. The ship creaked, the wind stilled, and then they heard it again. Knock from the railing, not from below, not from the hull, but from the actual deck. A single sound, like knuckles tapping steel. The captain whispered, "Is someone out here?" The operator's flashlight beam cut through the fog and illuminated something resting on the deck floor. Metal. Rectangular. Old. The historian's breath caught in his throat. No, that's not possible. The crew approached cautiously. What lay on the deck was a steel door. The same kind of door the drone had found deep inside the Titanic. The freestanding door with the porthole covered in fog from the inside. Except this one was smaller, thinner, and the porthole was cracked. The captain frowned. Where the hell did that come from? The historian stared at the object, trembling. It came from below. The engineer shook his head violently. No. It couldn't have risen 2 miles through the water. It couldn't have... The historian cut him off. It didn't rise. He looked directly at the drone. It was brought. The drone, still unpowered, vibrated once. Just once. As if acknowledging the truth. The historian crouched beside the door, touching the steel gently. It was cold, colder than the ocean air, colder than any metal should be above water. Frost clung to its surface. He wiped the dust away from the porthole. Inside the glass, a handprint, long, distorted, the same as the one in the void. And then, the handprint shifted, just a millimeter, just enough for the historian to see the fresh smear across the inside of the glass. He stumbled, back. There's something still inside it. The captain snapped. Nobody touches that door again. But they all stood frozen. Because the door, the one now on their deck, began to vibrate. Softly, rhythmically, in the same pulse pattern as the deep. The historian whispered shakily. It followed us to the surface. The vibrations grew stronger. The porthole darkened. Something inside leaned closer. And the door began to open. For a moment, no one moved. Not a step. Not a breath. The steel door sat silently on the deck, vibrating with a low, pulse-like tremor that seemed to sync with the rhythm of the deep ocean itself. Fog swept across the floor, curling around the doorframe as if drawn to it. The porthole darkened from within, as though something stood inches behind it, obscuring the faint moonlight trying to shine through. The historian whispered, "It can't open. Not up here. It shouldn't be able to." But the trembling grew stronger. Then it stopped. Completely. A silence fell so deep and absolute that the crew could hear the distant, heartbeat-like thrum of the ocean, the same bass hum that had followed the drone to the surface. The captain raised a hand slowly. Nobody moves. Nobody touches it. The team stood back, flashlights shaking in their hands, beams jittering across the steel. The door looked wrong, out of place, like it had been cut out of a different world and dropped here, onto the living space of the ship. The metal had a faint blue-gray gleam, colder than ice, as if it had never known sunlight. Then, a crack, a small one, hairline, running across the porthole's edge. The historian stumbled backward. No, that wasn't there before. Knock. A single, muffled tap came from behind the glass. Quiet, controlled, intentional. The same rhythm, the same message. The operator whispered, "It followed the drone because it wants to finish what started below." The captain's jaw tightened. "And we're not opening anything." But the door didn't seem to care. The crack spread, a thin line stretching from one side of the porthole to the other. A spiderweb fracture began blooming around the center. The crew stepped further away. Fog thickened around their legs, unnaturally thick for open water. It coiled upward, rising along the sides of the door, until the entire thing was shrouded in a pale, ghostly mist. Then the crack deepened. Cree! A sound like old metal warping under pressure rolled across the deck. The hinges, or whatever the door used in place of hinges, twitched. Back, the captain shouted. Everyone retreated. The door trembled once, twice. Then it stopped again. The historian frowned through the fog. It's waiting. For what? The engineer asked. For permission, the historian whispered. The operator nodded slowly, realization dawning. It needed us to open the void below, and we didn't. So it brought the door up here, where a human can open it. The captain shook his head violently. No one touches that door. We don't know what's inside. We do know, the historian replied softly. Something that followed us. Something that moved through the void. Something that wants access to this world. The captain pointed to the deck. Then we throw it overboard. The historian's face went pale. No. Why not? The captain demanded. Because if we throw it overboard, the historian replied, it will go back down, and whatever's inside will come back up, angrier than before. A beat of silence. Fog rolled higher. The door vibrated. Then the drone, still offline, still disconnected, emitted a faint glow. Not bright, just enough to reveal something none of them had seen before. A shadow behind the porthole. But not facing out. It was turned sideways, as if leaning, listening to them. The captain whispered. What the hell is it doing? The historian stepped forward, unable to resist the pull of curiosity. It's waiting to hear whether we'll open it. The operator grabbed his arm. Don't go near it, but the historian pulled free and approached slowly, fog coiling around his ankles. He crouched beside the cold steel, close enough to see his own faint reflection in the porthole. He whispered, What do you want? The door answered, not with a voice, not with movement, but with a breath. A cold exhale misted across the glass from the inside. The historian lurched back in horror as frost bloomed across the porthole, a delicate, crystallized pattern forming in seconds, stretching outward like veins. The operator shouted, Get away from it! The historian stumbled backward, and that's when they all saw it. Inside the frost, a shape, a face, not fully human, not fully formed, eyes hollow, mouth elongated. An echo of something that once resembled a person, shaped by pressure, darkness, and something older than either. The captain froze. The crew fell silent. The frost face leaned closer to the glass. The porthole cracked again, and a faint whisper, impossible but clear, drifted out. Open! The captain raised his radio instinctively, even though the comms were still down, and barked, Everyone off the deck! Move! But it was too late. The door shifted. Just an inch. Just enough to release a thin, icy gust of air, unlike anything that belonged on the surface. The drone glowed brighter. The ocean hummed. The fog surged upward. And the historian whispered in terror, It's not just here. His voice trembled. It's crossing over. The door moved again. Not a dramatic swing. Not a violent shift, but a slow, deliberate slide. Metal grinding against metal with a breathless scrape that ran down every spine on deck. The fog thickened around the frame, swirling upward like hands grasping at the air, forming shapes that dissolved as quickly as they appeared. The historian stumbled back until his shoulder hit the railing. The operator pulled him farther away as the captain shouted at the crew, Stay behind me! No one gets closer to that thing! But even from a distance, everyone could see it now. The porthole's interior was no longer dark. Something inside the door was glowing, a pale, ghost-like light, shifting in waves, illuminating a narrow sliver of the void beyond. It didn't look like the Titanic. It didn't look like the ocean. It looked like a hollow space carved out of pure nothingness, a place that should not exist. The historian's voice trembled as he whispered, "It's not just a door, it's a passage." The operator swallowed. To what? Fog curled around the hinges, or whatever passed for hinges, and the metal shook again. This time, the door opened another inch, then another. The cold that poured out was unnatural, not ocean cold. This felt older, emptier. A cold that seemed to pull the warmth out of breath, out of skin, out of thought. The captain lifted a flare gun, pointing it directly at the door. "Whatever's in there, it stays in there." The historian stepped in front of him. "No! You don't understand that if we damage the door," the captain snapped. "Are you defending that thing?" "No!" the historian shouted, voice cracking. "But if you destroy the door, you might destroy whatever boundary is keeping it from fully crossing into our world." A silence, fear-thick, suffocating, fell as the meaning sank in. Then the door opened wider. The fog surged outward like a tidal wave of mist. The crew staggered back, coughing as the cold, thick air washed over them. Flashlights flickered, struggling to penetrate the fog. That's when they saw it. A hand, long, narrow, fingers elongated by impossible distortion. A silhouette pressed against the porthole glass again. But this time, not from inside. From the side, as if something was reaching around the doorframe rather than pushing through it. The hand scraped downward, leaving frost trails behind. The engineer whispered, trembling, "It's outside the void." A new sound made everyone freeze. A wet, dragging inhale. A breath drawn in through a space that should not allow air. The void was learning. It was adapting. It was preparing. The captain stepped back, raising his voice to a near shout. "Everyone fall back to the interior! Now!" The crew retreated toward the door leading into the control room. The fog chased them like a living thing, crawling across the deck, slipping into every gap between their feet, reaching for them. Then the drone activated. Cerberus X-1 lit up with a violent burst of white-blue light, brighter than any man-made source should be able to produce without power. Its cameras turned toward the door on the deck, pointing, locking, staring, as if responding to a command. The historian shouted, "Don't touch it!" But the drone had already begun moving, sliding across the deck like it did below, drawn by a force stronger than gravity. "No! No, no!" the operator yelled, sprinting to grab it. But the drone moved too fast. It slid straight across the fog-covered deck, directly toward the door. The captain grabbed the operator, pulling him back. "Let it go!" The drone hit the steel door. Clang! And the entire world seemed to inhale at once. The door stopped vibrating. The fog froze in midair. Even the ocean seemed to hold its breath. The porthole cleared, and inside, for the first time, the crew saw eyes, not human, not animal. Hollow black sockets, deeper than the void they came from, set into a face stretched thin like wet cloth. The eyes locked onto the crew. The historian felt his knees weaken. "It sees us." The drone's glow flickered 3 times. Something behind the door flickered back. A pulse, a signal, a communication. The captain whispered, "What is it saying?" The historian swallowed. "It's saying, 'The door is ready.'" The wind died. The fog held still. The eyes behind the glass did not blink, and then the door began to swing open, not forced, not pushed, but willingly, inviting. The fog spun into a spiral, as if the void behind the door were inhaling. A voice, layered, hollow, ancient, drifted through the widening gap. A single command, "Come." The drone slid forward, just an inch, then another. The historian reached out instinctively. "Stop it! Stop it! Don't let it!" But the drone continued moving. Something inside the door responded, shape shifting, stretching, forming a silhouette that stepped closer. 1 foot emerged through the gap. Then a second. The air pressure dropped. Lights flickered. The crew stumbled back as the world felt like it was bending. Whatever had followed them from the Titanic was stepping onto their ship. The fog parted like curtains as the shape behind the door took its first step onto the deck. Not fast, not violent, slow, too slow, like something savoring its emergence into a world it had been separated from for over a century. The crew backed up in a single collective motion, breath trapped in their throats. Flashlights trembled, beams stuttering across the figure as it moved through the half-open doorway. At first, the shape was only a silhouette. Tall, thin, impossibly elongated. The fog clung to it, hiding details, revealing only vague angles where limbs might be. It walked without sound, without weight, as if its feet never truly contacted the deck. Then the fog shifted, and a portion of its arm emerged. The flesh was pale. No, not pale. Translucent. A sickly, bluish-white glow pulsed faintly beneath its surface, like distant bioluminescence trapped inside rotting skin. The historian nearly collapsed at the sight. That's not a body. That's not a human form. The engineer's flashlight hit the creature full on. The fog peeled away, and the figure came into view, long limbs. A torso stretched beyond natural proportion, tapering at the waist. Skin hanging thin like soaked fabric. No visible mouth. Just a smooth, stretched surface where a face should be, except for two black, cavernous holes, set too deep to belong to anything alive. The eyes stared directly at the crew, empty, hungry, awake. A strangled whisper escaped the radio officer's throat. "It looks drowned," but the historian shook his head in terror. "No, it looks unfinished." The creature stepped fully out of the doorway. The door behind it swung wider, as if pushed by a current that did not exist. The void beyond the door looked deeper now, darker, swirling with thick shadows that moved like a living storm. The edges of the doorway distorted slightly, warping the air around them. The creature paused. It lowered its head toward the drone still resting at its feet. And the drone, powerless, mechanical, lifeless, responded. It turned on. Lights flaring, systems igniting, thrusters whining to life. "No, no, shut it down!" the operator screamed. The crew rushed forward, but the drone floated upward off the deck, levitating, humming with an unnatural frequency. It hovered directly in front of the creature, like a servant answering a master. The captain raised his flare gun again. "Back off! I'll shoot!" The creature lifted its head toward him, and the air changed. The temperature plummeted. Frost bloomed across the deck in seconds. The flare gun jammed, metal contracting under the sudden cold. The captain cursed and dropped it, shaking his frozen fingers. The historian whispered, breathing shallowly. "It's manipulating the environment." The creature raised one elongated hand. The drone floated into that hand. Its metal shell frost-cracked under the creature's touch, but it didn't fall. It stayed suspended, rotating slowly as if being scanned by some unseen force. Then the creature turned its gaze back to the crew, and for the first time, it moved its face. The smooth surface rippled, sagged, stretched, as though something beneath was trying to shape the expression of a human that no longer existed. A faint sound echoed from its chest. Not a voice. A memory of a voice. A distorted human breath layered through a deep ocean groan. "Open the way!" The historian staggered backward, horrified. "It wants the void. Open wider. It wants something else to come through." The operator shouted, "Stop! Stop moving toward us!" But the creature stepped forward anyway. The mist surged behind it, pouring through the widened doorway, as if the void itself were spilling onto the deck. The metal floor darkened wherever the fog touched, frost crawling like vines. The creature extended its hand. Not aggressively, not attacking, offering, like it wanted someone to take it. No, the historian breathed. It wants someone to go with it. The crew recoiled instantly. The creature's head tilted sharply, like it didn't understand the rejection. The smooth skin of its face quivered, rippling again, almost forming a mouth. Then it spoke a second time, clearer, louder, more human than before. "Return. With me." The captain raised his voice. "Everyone inside. Now, move!" The creature's hand snapped downward, not touching anyone, but commanding the fog. The mist shot forward like a wave, pushing the crew back toward the door. Flashlights flickered out, one by one, until only the drone's cold white glow remained. The historian tripped and fell, scrambling backward as the creature towered above him. It leaned down, close, too close. The hollow black eyes stared into his, and the historian felt something pulling at him. Not physically, but mentally, dragging his thoughts toward the void behind the door. He gasped, choking. The creature whispered, "You opened the way. You come first." The historian screamed. The creature reached out, fingers inches from his face. And then, a deafening crack ripped across the deck. The ship lurched violently as if struck from below again. But harder, far harder this time. Everyone was thrown off their feet. The creature staggered backward. The door behind it slammed against the railing, wobbling. The void roared, an unnatural gargled howl that felt like the ocean itself was tearing. Something else was rising. Something bigger. Something that even the creature feared. It turned its head sharply toward the door. Then toward the deep. And for the first time, the creature looked afraid. The deck shook again. Not from the creature now standing in front of them, but from something beneath the ship. Something rising so fast, so violently, that the water itself seemed to recoil from it. A deep rumble vibrated through the hull, shaking every bolt, every railing, every breath in the crew's chests. Unlike the rhythmic knocks or the methodical tapping before, this was chaotic, massive, uncontrolled. The historian scrambled backward as the creature, the one that had stepped through the door, whipped its head toward the ocean's surface. The void fog trembled around its legs as the air pressure dropped hard enough to make ears ring. "What now?" the operator gasped. The creature turned its hollow eyes toward the deep, and for the first time, it didn't move like it controlled the environment. It moved like it recognized something. Something stronger. Something older. Something it did not want to face. The sonar officer, pale as chalk, stared at the flickering screen as it struggled to stay online. "It's big. Whatever is rising is huge. No, that's wrong. It's wider than the ship," the captain shouted. "Give me clear readings." "I can't. The sonar can't map it," the officer yelled. "It's distorting everything, and the void signature is bending the signal." Another violent tremor hit the hull. The creature staggered back, its hands opening, its face rippling with a soundless hiss. Then it did something none of them expected. It retreated. It stepped away from the crew, away from the door, away from the fog spilling across the deck. It looked down into the ocean, not with hunger, not with curiosity, but with fear. The historian whispered, "It wasn't the only thing inside the void." The operator's voice cracked. "Then what else is down there?" The entire ship lurched, as if something collided with the underside. But this impact was bigger than anything before. Deck plates buckled, railings bent. The drone crashed against the floor. Fog blew outward in a violent spiral. The creature turned toward the void door and extended its hand toward the widening blackness. Not to invite something through, but to close it. The captain stumbled. "It's trying to shut the door." The historian nodded, terror widening his eyes. "Because something else is forcing its way up." The fog inside the doorway twisted violently, sucked inward like a reverse current. The thin metal frame warped, bending inward as if pulled by immense pressure from the other side. Then, a deep, impossible roar erupted below the ship. Not human, not mechanical, not anything that belonged to the ocean. A roar layered with thousands of distant echoes, like the voices of the drowned rising all at once. The water below churned violently, boiling up in a massive swirl around the hull. Sea spray blasted into the air as if the entire Atlantic were being lifted. And then the historian saw it. A shadow. Not small. Not one figure. A massive form bigger than the Titanic's bow, rising toward the surface with terrifying speed. The sonar blinked out completely, unable to track the scale of whatever was approaching. The captain shouted into the wind, "Everyone inside, move!" But no one could look away. A shape, too large to comprehend, moved beneath the surface, glowing faintly with the same ghost light the drone emitted earlier. But this light was bigger, wider, pulsing, alive. The creature on the deck snapped its head toward the void door and slammed its hand onto the metal frame. The door vibrated violently. Fog screamed inward. The void rippled like a black sheet of water. The historian yelled, "It's closing it! It's trying to seal it!" But the sea exploded upward. A fountain of water shot 30 feet into the air. The ship jerked sideways, nearly capsizing. Crew members tumbled across the deck. Through the storm of water, something broke the surface. A tentacle-like structure, translucent, dripping, glowing with void light. It slapped against the hull with a thunderous crack. The creature on deck hissed, a sharp, guttural sound, and pushed harder on the door. The void roared again. Wind howled. Fog thrashed. The drone shook violently in midair, caught in the pull between two forces. The historian screamed over the storm, "It's not trying to harm us, it's trying to stop what's coming." The void door shook uncontrollably. The creature leaned in, using its full weight, and then, crack! The translucent tentacle whipped upward, wrapping around the railing, crushing metal. The void creature turned sharply, a face of hollow fear. It slammed its hand into the door. The door snapped shut. Boom! A shockwave blasted across the deck. Fog imploded inward. The tentacle froze midair, then severed cleanly, as if sliced by an invisible blade, retracting violently into the sea below. Silence. The void door fell flat onto the deck, lifeless, cold, dim. The creature on the deck staggered backward, weakened. It looked at the crew. Its hollow eyes dimmed. Its figure flickered, dissolving around the edges. The historian, trembling, whispered, "It wasn't attacking us." The creature began collapsing into mist, its shape unraveling like smoke in a slow, mournful retreat. It was protecting us. The final whisper left its fading form, a sound as fragile as the last breath of a drowning soul. "Close. The way." Then it vanished. The void door went dark. The sea stilled. The deck fell silent. But as the crew caught their breath, the sonar blinked back online. A final reading appeared on the screen. Unknown mass, descending depth, 700 men, 1100 meter, 1900 meter. No further data signature, lost. The historian collapsed to his knees. "We didn't just wake something inside the Titanic." He looked up at the others, face pale, shaking. "We woke something the things inside the Titanic were afraid of." The captain stared at the dark ocean and whispered,